Right. Let's jump into a world where free, well, doesn't actually mean, free.
Yeah.
Today we're talking about free software. And
It's more interesting than it sounds, I
it
promise.
really is. Way more. Like free speech,
Sure.
not free beer.
Exactly.
That kind of free. Software that gives you the freedom to use it, study it, even change it.
And share it however you like.
Exactly.
It really flips the script on how we normally think about software. It's about users actually having control, not just being, well, passive consumers.
Totally. And in this world, there are two, main camps. The free software folks
Yeah.
who, they're all about ethics and user rights.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have the open source folks.
Right.
They tend to focus on the practical benefits of, working together.
Yeah. Collaboration.
Collaboration, yeah. And there is a lot of overlap between the
That's
two.
for sure.
But those philosophical differences, those are pretty significant.
Yeah, they can really impact everything, from how the software is actually made to its impact on society, like the whole picture.
Okay, so let's break all this down. When we say free software, what are we really talking about?
Well, you have the freedom to speak your mind, right? Free software aims to give you that same kind of freedom, but with the software you use.
Okay.
The Free Software Foundation, they're kind of the champions of this whole movement.
Right.
They lay out 4 essential freedoms, you could say.
Okay.
First, you're free to run the program however you want. You can study how it works. And then, and this is key, you can adapt it to fit your needs.
Okay.
Then, you're free to share copies with anyone you want.
All right.
And finally, you can distribute copies of your modified version. Like if you've changed it, you can share that too.
So it's not just about, getting software without paying, right?
Yeah.
It's about having the right to actually understand the software, mess around with it,
Right.
make changes, and then share those with other people.
Yeah, exactly. And to really do all that, you need to get into the guts of it, the source code. That's the instructions behind it all.
Right.
And without access to that, these freedoms are basically meaningless.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, I've also heard terms like open source or even Libre software,
Yeah.
FLAWASS thrown around.
Right.
Are those all just different ways of saying the same thing?
They do get lumped together a lot, and there is definitely overlap.
Okay.
But there are some really important differences in their philosophies, like open source, that usually focuses on the pluses, the advantages of working together, making development a collaborative thing, and widespread use. Whereas free software, they put ethics first. They're all about user freedom no matter what.
So they're both kind of aiming for a world where software is more open and easier to work with, but they get there in different ways.
Yeah, different priorities, you could say. And these different perspectives, they really show up in interesting ways when we get into how free software is licensed.
Licensing. This is where it gets complicated, right?
A little bit, yeah.
I mean, you have stuff that's completely public domain, and then there are licenses with all these rules and requirements, and
it's true, it runs the gamut.
Yeah.
It's like setting the rules for a game,
Right.
The license you choose determines how that software can be used, can be changed, can be shared.
Okay.
So, for example, public domain, that's like a free-for-all. No copyright restrictions, anyone can do anything with it, change it, even sell it.
So that's as open as it gets, I guess.
Yeah.
But what about the licenses that do have rules? What are some of the big ones out there?
Well, on one end of the spectrum, you have what are called permissive licenses, like MIT and BSD licenses. They're known for being straightforward, simple, and flexible,
Yeah.
They basically say, do whatever you want with this software, even use it commercially, but give the original author credit. That's it.
So it's like, hey, I helped you out. Just give me a little shout out, kind of.
Yeah. Pay it forward a little.
Okay.
You benefit from someone else's hard work, and in return, you just acknowledge that.
Gotcha.
And because these licenses are so business friendly,
Yeah.
they've become super popular. Like even giants, Microsoft and Apple, they've used things licensed under BSD in their own products.
Wow. So even the companies that are all about, keeping things closed off, they're using free software.
It's kind of amazing, right?
That's
It speaks to how powerful these open models can be. But on the other side, you have copyleft licenses, and the big one here is the GPL.
Okay, the GPL, I've definitely heard of it, but I'll be honest, it's always seemed a little mysterious.
Yeah.
What makes it so different from these permissive licenses?
Think of the GPL as like a freedom protector. It's based on this idea of giving back. Reciprocity. You use GPL software, you change it up, you're obligated to release your new version under that same GPL license.
Okay.
So it's like a chain reaction. Everything stays open, derivative works, all that. Everyone gets access.
It's like paying it forward, but like with a real focus on keeping everything open for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why the GPL, it's sometimes called a viral license.
I can see why.
Sleds everywhere.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I can also see how that could create some tension,
Yeah.
especially in the business world where, like, companies are all about protecting their stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
Choosing between permissive and copyleft, it comes down to this philosophical debate, Do you want to make things easy to use and get the software out there, even if it means some of it becomes, proprietary, closed off? Or do you want to prioritize those user freedoms?
Even if it makes it harder to sell, basically.
Right. It's a tough call.
Sounds like a tough balancing act for
Yeah.
sure. But you know what? I think it's time for us to take a quick break. We'll be back in a few minutes to dig into the real world stuff. See how these licensing choices play out.
Looking forward to it.
And hey, if you're enjoying this deep dive, don't forget to subscribe to 15-Minute Discourse. We'll be back soon. Before the break, we were getting into like the heart of free software licensing.
Yeah, the licensing stuff.
Yeah, and it's obvious there's some strong feelings on both sides.
Oh, absolutely. The passion, it really shows you what's at stake here. We're not just talking about code, It gets into beliefs, fundamental beliefs about how software should be made, shared, controlled, the whole thing.
It really seems like this whole free software thing, it's kind of a pushback against this idea that software should be like a product, something you just buy and sell.
That's a really good point, actually. At its heart, that's exactly what the free software movement is doing. It's challenging that old way of thinking. It's about giving the user back their right to understand, change, share the software they use. They're not just at the mercy of some corporation.
So it's shifting away from a purely, market-driven thing to something more community-focused.
Right, like a shared ownership kind of thing.
Yeah.
Some people even call it a return to a gift economy.
Gift economy. That's interesting. What did that even mean when we're talking about software?
Well, think of it like this. It's a system where, you're exchanging things, goods and services, but freely. Not because of money, but based on, like, mutual benefit. You scratch my back, I scratch yours.
Okay.
Developers, they put their time and energy into creating this free software, not because they're going to get rich off it, but because they believe in it. They want to make something good for everyone.
Yeah, I see how that fits in with the whole free software philosophy. It's like a group effort.
Yeah.
Everyone working together because they're passionate about technology and they want to make it so users have more power.
That's it. And this gift economy idea, it really highlights the philosophical differences between, the free software movement and the open source movement. They both want the same things, but how they go about getting there, that's where things get interesting.
Okay, I'm getting it, but I think it would help to really break down those differences.
Sure.
How do they actually play out in the real world?
Well, the Free Software Foundation, they're the ones who are really serious about this user freedom thing.
Right.
Richard Stallman leads them.
Yeah.
Those 4 freedoms, using, studying, changing, sharing software, those are like non-negotiables. They're not just like nice perks.
And they're big on copyleft licenses like the GPL, which we talked about, to make sure those freedoms are protected.
It's like a legal shield, copyleft. It makes sure companies can't just come in, take free software, stick it in their products, and then shut everyone out.
Right.
Keeps things open.
Yeah, so it's about creating a system where free software can survive, it can grow, and everyone benefits, not just the big companies.
Exactly. Now, on the other side, you have the open source movement. Same goals, mostly.
Yeah.
But they're more about the practical benefits. More innovation, faster development, better quality software, that kind of stuff.
So they're not as worried about the ethics of it all?
Not as much.
It's more about, like, what works, what gets us good software.
Right. They see the value in collaboration and making things open so you get really robust, reliable software. More people looking at the code, more bugs get caught.
Yeah.
Better software for everybody. And they're not that bothered if it ends up being used in commercial products.
So it's like 2 different roads leading to the same place.
You got it. Both believe in open collaboration, but how they get there, the focus, that's what's different.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
these different approaches, they sometimes cause a little friction, within the free and open source community as a whole.
Right. We talked about the GPL-v3
Yeah,
and how it doesn't work with GPL-v2.
right.
That seemed to cause some real problems
Oh
with
yeah.
some developers sticking to the old way and others saying, forget it, I'm going with permissive licenses.
Yeah, exactly. And permissive licenses like MIT, they're just getting more and more popular, especially with businesses. You see it all over GitHub.
Hmm.
So the big question is this going to weaken copyleft? Is it going to tip the scales in the software industry? It's a debate that's still going on.
Yeah, it sounds like to make this work, you got to be really careful, balance things out, stick to those core values of free software, but also be realistic about how the tech world works.
That's a tightrope walk, for sure.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, what's next for this movement?
Right. What does the future hold? What are the big challenges, the big opportunities for free software?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles, honestly, is just the sheer number of free software licenses out there. It's like a jungle of legal stuff. A license proliferation, they call it.
I bet that's a headache for developers.
Oh, it's a nightmare. Makes it super tough to choose the right license for your project. So many tiny details, so many variations, it's overwhelming. And then you have compatibility problems. Different licenses, it's hard to share code, work together effectively.
So instead of this nice unified system where everyone's collaborating,
Yeah.
it's actually creating more divisions.
That's exactly it. Fragmentation. And that goes against everything the free software movement stands for. Makes it harder to build those communities, harder for new people to come in. It's too much to wrap your head around.
It's almost like a paradox, right?
Yeah.
The freedom to create, the freedom to choose these different licenses, that's actually creating problems for the movement itself.
You got it. It's a real tension, and the movement's going to have to figure out how to deal with it.
And then, of course, there's the whole copyleft versus permissive thing.
Right.
Like, as permissive licenses become more popular, especially with businesses, there's this worry that copyleft, with its whole giving back requirement, it might not be enough to protect software freedom anymore.
It's a legitimate concern. If permissive licenses take over, we could see more and more free software just swallowed up by proprietary products. Users end up with less control.
Right.
And those core freedoms that the movement's fought so hard for, they start to disappear.
So to really make free software work long term, it has to find that sweet spot, that balance, stay true to its principles, but also adapt to how the software industry is changing.
It's high stakes, that's for sure. The decisions we make now, they're going to shape the digital world we live in tomorrow.
Well, this has been really fascinating. Free software, it's way more than just, getting something for free.
It really is.
But before we move on, I think it's important to talk about the impact this movement has had on society, on all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. From powering the internet to giving people access to technology who might not otherwise have it, free software has changed so much, and we don't even realize it half the time.
We've only just scratched the surface, but I hope our listeners will go out and learn more,
Yeah.
explore all the different aspects of this movement. There's so much to discover.
And for those who already know a bit about free software, I hope this deep dive gave them something new to think about.
We'll be back after a quick break to talk about how free software impacts society, the whole security debate, and what we can all do to help this movement grow. Stay tuned. Welcome back to 15-Minute Discourse. We've been, really getting into the weeds of free software, all the philosophy behind it, the challenges it's up against.
And now, in this last part, I think we should zoom out a little. Look at the bigger picture, how this movement affects society.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just about, lines of code, right? No, it's about people.
Yeah, it's about people. And it has the potential to make a real difference in the world. Like, we talked about the digital divide earlier, but I think we should go a little deeper there. How can free software help bridge that gap, the gap between the people who have access to technology and those who don't?
Well, one of the most straightforward ways is it makes technology more affordable.
Right.
When you take away that cost, those proprietary software licenses,
Yeah.
it opens up so many doors
Mhm.
for individuals, organizations, even governments,
Yeah.
especially in developing countries, places that don't have a lot of resources.
Yeah, that makes sense. Software can be really expensive.
Oh, it can be a huge barrier.
Yeah.
But it's not just about cost, it's about independence too.
Okay.
Free software lets users be in control of their own stuff, their devices, their data. They're not relying on some company that might have its own agenda.
So it's not just about having access, it's about having the power to choose.
That's it. It's giving people the tools to shape their own digital lives. I like that.
And there are organizations out there doing great work on this front.
Okay.
The Free Software Foundation, Europe, FSFE, they're really pushing for the use of free software in governments, public institutions, more transparency, more citizen participation.
Right, like their campaign, public
Everyone.
money, public code.
Exactly. If your tax dollars are paying for software, it should be available to everyone.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But like any movement that tries to shake things up, there are going to be bumps in the road, right?
Sure.
What are some of the biggest challenges facing the free software movement as it tries to, make a real difference?
Well, one challenge is you need some tech skills.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of free software is designed to be user-friendly, there's still a learning curve sometimes,
Okay.
especially when it comes to customizing things, troubleshooting, that kind of thing.
So it's not enough to just make the software available. You need to show people how to use it.
Education, support, it's all part of it. And then there's the challenge of building communities.
Yeah.
Strong communities around these free software projects. They're crucial for support, documentation, keeping the development going.
I bet getting people to volunteer their time, it can't be easy, especially when you're up against these huge tech companies with all their money and influence.
It's a constant struggle, and of course, funding is always a concern.
Right. So the free software movement, it needs to find a way to keep that grassroots spirit, the volunteerism, but also find ways to support itself, to grow.
That's the balancing act.
Yeah, it is. So looking ahead with all these challenges and opportunities, what are the big questions for the future of free software?
Well, one's definitely security.
Yeah.
We talked about that.
Yeah.
How do we make sure things are secure? You want transparency, you want people to be able to see the code work together, but you don't want to make it easy for the bad guys to exploit weaknesses.
Right. Right. That's huge. And how does free software stay relevant, stay competitive when you have these giant companies like Google and Apple calling all the shots?
Those are big questions, and maybe even more fundamental. How do we get the word out? How do we explain what free software is all about to people who don't live and breathe tech?
Right. It's like trying to explain the rules of a game to someone who's never even seen it played.
Exactly. If free software is really going to make a difference, it needs to connect with people, show them why it matters, get them excited to be a part of it.
So it's not just about the technology. It's about us, about our values, the kind of digital world we want to live in.
That's it. Empowering people, working together, making sure technology serves us, not the other way around.
Well, this has been an amazing journey into the world of free software. It's really incredible to see all the passion, all the energy that's pushing this movement forward.
It really is inspiring. Shows you that even in a world where big tech seems to control everything, individuals and communities can still make a difference.
Yeah, they can. And with that, we come to the end of our deep dive into free software.
We covered a lot of ground today, but this is really just the start of the conversation.
If you're intrigued, check out the resources in the show notes, get involved in the community. There are so many ways to contribute to help build a digital future that's all about freedom, collaboration, and fairness.
And remember, software, it's not just about the code. It reflects who we are, what we believe in, the choices we make about how we create and use it. They're going to shape the world we build together.
Thanks for joining us on 15-Minute Discourse. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into a fascinating topic.